Have you ever wondered why we eat chicken all the time, but almost never hear about male chickens on our plates? At first, this seems strange. After all, roosters are still chickens. They can grow, and they absolutely can be eaten. So why don't we usually see them in grocery stores? The answer begins with what chickens are raised to produce. For thousands of years, humans kept chickens for different reasons. Hens could provide something incredibly valuable: eggs. And that difference changed the entire chicken industry. So why don't supermarkets sell something called male chicken? The surprising answer begins with one important distinction. Not all chickens are bred for the same job. Some chickens are basically designed to produce eggs. Others are designed to produce meat. And once humans started selectively breeding chickens for these different purposes, the fate of male and female chicks began to separate. Think about an egg farm. The goal is simple: produce as many eggs as possible, as efficiently as possible. For that job, the valuable bird is the female. A hen can lay hundreds of eggs over her productive lifetime. A rooster can't lay a single one. So if you're running an egg-producing flock, raising large numbers of male chicks doesn't help you produce more eggs. But here's where things get interesting. You might think, fine, just raise the males for meat. And technically, you can. People have eaten male chickens for centuries. Roosters can be cooked and eaten. In some cultures, they're still used in traditional dishes. There are even specialized ways of raising male chickens for meat. So the question isn't whether male chickens are edible. They absolutely are. The real question is, why aren't they usually the chicken meat we buy? And the answer comes down to genetics. Modern chicken farming has created specialized birds. Egg-laying chickens are bred primarily for efficient egg production. Meat chickens, called broilers, are bred for something completely different: rapid growth and efficient production of meat. These birds aren't simply ordinary chickens raised longer. Their genetics have been shaped for different purposes. A modern broiler can reach market weight surprisingly quickly. Commercial broilers are commonly processed at only several weeks of age. Layer chickens, meanwhile, are smaller-bodied birds selected for producing eggs efficiently. Some commercial egg-laying strains are specifically suited to high egg production. And that creates a strange problem. Imagine a hatchery producing chicks. The hatchery wants female chicks. Those females will eventually become laying hens. But roughly half of the chicks are male, and those males cannot become egg-laying hens. They also aren't the same kind of bird as broilers. That's the crucial point. A male chick isn't automatically a good meat chicken. It may grow more slowly. It may convert feed into meat less efficiently. And it may produce a smaller carcass than a specialized broiler. So now we have a bird that isn't useful for producing eggs, and isn't particularly efficient for producing meat. And that creates an economic problem, because raising any animal costs resources. The bird needs feed, it needs space, it needs heating when young, it needs water, it needs labor, and eventually it needs to be processed. If the amount of meat you get doesn't justify those costs, raising that bird commercially doesn't make much sense. This is one reason modern poultry production became so specialized. Instead of asking one chicken to do everything, farmers could breed different chickens for different jobs. One type became extremely good at laying eggs. Another became extremely good at producing meat. It's a little like having a race car and a delivery truck. Both are vehicles, but you wouldn't choose the race car to transport furniture, and you wouldn't choose the delivery truck to win a race. They're optimized for different purposes. The same basic idea applies to chickens. A layer is optimized for eggs. A broiler is optimized for meat, and this specialization completely changes what happens to male chicks. But there's an important twist. Not all male chickens are unwanted. If you're producing broiler chickens for meat, both males and females can be raised. Commercial meat chickens are generally produced as mixed sex groups, and both sexes can become meat birds. So when you buy ordinary chicken meat, you're not necessarily eating only male chickens. The meat industry uses birds from specialized meat strains. The sex isn't the main reason they're being raised. Their genetics and growth characteristics are. This means the chicken on your plate doesn't tell you whether it was male or female, and that's why the question becomes even more interesting. The chicken industry essentially split into two different worlds: the egg world and the meat world. In the egg world, females are extremely valuable because they produce eggs. But there is another part of the story that is much darker. When a hatchery produces chicks for egg production, the male chicks from egg-laying strains have historically presented a major problem. They aren't needed for producing table eggs, and many aren't economically suitable for conventional meat production. Historically, commercial hatcheries have therefore used different methods to deal with these surplus males, including culling. This has become one of the major ethical issues surrounding modern egg production, and it has pushed researchers and companies to search for alternatives. One approach is sometimes called in ovo sex determination. The basic idea is simple. Instead of waiting until chicks hatch and then determining their sex, researchers investigate ways to identify the sex of the embryo while it's still inside the egg. If an egg contains a male embryo that would not be raised for egg production, the goal is to identify it before hatch. Different technologies and policies are being developed in different places, so the situation varies considerably by country and production system. But the underlying problem remains the same. An egg farm needs hens. A rooster cannot produce eggs. And a layer-type male isn't necessarily an efficient meat bird. Now here's something most people don't realize. Male chickens weren't always treated as useless. Before modern industrial breeding, many chicken breeds were more general purpose. A farmer might keep chickens for eggs, meat, reproduction, feathers, or simply as part of a household flock. Some traditional breeds are still considered dual-purpose birds, meaning they can provide both eggs and meat. In a small backyard flock, the situation can be completely different from a massive commercial operation. A rooster can provide fertile eggs for breeding. A male chicken can eventually become food. And a slower-growing bird may be perfectly acceptable if efficiency isn't the only goal. The strange situation we see today is largely a consequence of scale. When you're raising a few chickens, flexibility matters. When you're producing millions of eggs or chickens, efficiency becomes enormously important. Every gram of feed matters. Every week of growth matters. Every square foot of housing matters. And every bird has to fit into the system. That's why the modern chicken isn't just a chicken. It can be a layer, a broiler, a breeder, or a dual-purpose bird. Humans have essentially turned one species into specialized biological tools, and that specialization explains the mystery. We don't avoid male chickens because male chicken meat is dangerous. We don't avoid them because roosters are somehow inedible. And we don't avoid them because male chickens don't have meat. We avoid seeing them as a major commercial food category because the poultry industry doesn't need them in the same way it needs specialized layers and broilers. The male chicken from an egg-laying strain doesn't produce eggs. And compared with specialized meat birds, it may not be the most economical bird to raise for meat. Meanwhile, male broilers absolutely can become meat. They're simply sold as chicken rather than marketed specifically as male chicken. So the next time you see a package labeled simply chicken, remember something strange. That meat could come from a male or female bird. The important thing isn't necessarily the bird's sex, it's what kind of chicken it was bred to become. And that leads to the bigger lesson. Humans didn't just domesticate chickens, we redesigned their jobs. We created birds optimized for eggs and birds optimized for meat. And once we did that, the question of what happens to male chickens became an unavoidable consequence of the system. So why don't we eat male chickens? We actually do. We just don't usually notice them. The male chickens raised for meat are part of the same chicken supply you see in stores. The birds that create the complicated situation are mainly male chicks from egg-laying strains, because they can't lay eggs and often aren't efficient meat birds. And that's the strange part. The chicken industry didn't eliminate male chickens from our food. It simply separated chickens into different jobs, and made us stop thinking about where each bird fits. Because when you look closely, the chicken on your plate isn't just a chicken. It's the result of generations of breeding, economics, farming, and human decisions about what we want an animal to do. The word chicken hides a surprising amount of biological diversity. Behind one familiar food are several very different kinds of birds. And each kind exists because humans valued particular characteristics. From breeding to farming, every step shapes the final food. That supermarket package is really the final piece of a much bigger system. What looks natural on our plates is often carefully designed by people. That's why chickens today can look so different from one another. The animal disappears from view long before the food reaches your plate. And that makes the modern chicken industry surprisingly easy to overlook, because sometimes the simplest food hides the most complicated story.